So with us, alhamdulillah, we have a great speaker, mashallah, Dr. Ahmed Bayoun. Dr. Ahmed was born in Beirut, Lebanon, where he received his BS and MS from the American University of Beirut. Then he went on to acquire his PhD in entomology at Texas A&M. And alhamdulillah, he also received his PhD in Islamic Studies from the Theological Foundation. And he currently lives in Riverside, California, where he is a faculty member at the University of California, Riverside. Dr. Ahmed, his topic today, inshallah, will be comprehensive and personal balance. So a little bit about that. We can understand Islam by looking at it as a complete and comprehensive way of life. How we function in society, the economy, and also the political realm as Muslims. Through this understanding of Islam, the last divine message from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's relevant to all human beings and at all times. How do we take the message of Islam and apply it to solve our problems in the 21st century? Dr. Ahmed, inshallah, will be tackling this issue. Please welcome him.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه من والاه. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us recognize the truth and help us follow it, and to help us recognize the falsehood and help us avoid it. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make the best of our deeds, the last ones that we do, and the best of our days, that we shall meet Him. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Actually, the introduction is bigger than my speech. A little more impressive, jazakallah khair. The topic is about really comprehensiveness and specifically actually focusing on the personal balance and approaching that. Now, of course, when you talk about Islam, it is a comprehensive way of life, whether we realize it or not, but it is something that permeates all aspects of our life. So everything basically goes back to the same goal. That's the way it should go, that everything goes in harmony for the same goal. But when you're talking about a comprehensive way of life, where you're supposed to do everything or everything in your life is part of that big whole, how much of each do you do? How much of this do you do? How much of that do you do? That's why the complement of that with an E, what completes the picture, is to achieve a balance. Because when you have multiple aspects, it's a worship, it's an activism, it's a character, it's a family life, it's rituals, it's all of that. But how much of each of that do you do? That's really where the question lies. That's why here, achieving a balance, it is something that everybody actually is supposed to do. So achieving a balance among obligations, whether it's work, family, da'wah work, any form of activism, and leisure and whatnot, achieving a balance within that, but more importantly, achieving a balance within. Not just about the tasks that we're doing, but achieving a personal, individual balance within. And this is something that, if we ignore, is going to come back and hit us in the face. In other words, it is something that we'll be forced to do, whether we like it or not. And it is key to our feeling of fulfillment and happiness and balance actually in our life, is to achieve that. It's just like, for example, if you have a specific diet that is missing an essential nutrient, something that is essential, an essential vitamin or an essential mineral, for example. If you keep eating that same diet, eventually your body will fall down, eventually, because it's something that the body needs. And the same thing when you're talking about achieving a balance, if you ignore certain aspect of yourself, of your own being, then it's going to come back actually and hit you in the face. And I think something really important to keep in mind, that as human being, we are made out of two components, the physical and the spiritual. The physical, the body, and the spiritual, the spirit. And both are the heart and what goes under that category. And both have to be fed in order for the person to achieve happiness and fulfillment. Now, unfortunately, what happens in the common society today, everywhere in the world, by the way, not just here in the US, is that everything is promoting the physical. Everything is pushing for the physical. In other words, everything is feeding that element, that physical, but the heart is starving in the process. So when the heart starves, you start feeling down and depressed. And what's the solution that people give you? Go watch a movie, do some shopping, go on a vacation, meaning feeding the body more. But yet still, the essence is neglected, which is that of the heart. And neglecting the heart, like I said, will be a recipe for a personal disaster in a certain way. Because when we reduce yourself into one aspect of you, you're being unjust to yourself first and foremost. You know, as human beings, like I said, we're not just the physical, but there's more into us than the physical. And if I define myself by the physical, I'm being unjust to myself. It's like, taking just as an example, somebody who went through the arduous task of training to become a physician, a doctor. And he completes the whole process, and at the end, he works as a cashier in a supermarket. No disrespect to the cashier, but the person was trained for something different than that. And when the person neglects all the training and all the potential that he has and reduces himself into one particular task, he's being unjust to himself. And that's really what we do to ourselves. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prepared the human being to be something great, something of significance, and we reduce ourselves into satisfying our physical desires. That the purpose of my existence is to satisfy my physical desires, carnal desires, feeding or sexual, whatever it is. Well, what happened to the heart? What happened to the intellect? What happened to the other aspect, which actually makes most of what I am? I am more my heart than I am the physical. So that's why when the person actually neglects that, then he will be the first person to suffer. It's like somebody who spends his time polishing and cleaning a shell when the pearl inside is covered with filth. The shell is supposed to protect and to present, but the essence is what's inside. And that's really what we neglect much of the time. And just like the body needs multiple meals a day, many of them, the heart does the same. Just like the body needs to be fed more than once a day, the heart and the spirit need to be fed more than once a day. And just like the body needs multiple food, if I keep feeding you sabayat or sorbiyan or whatever food you like, every day you're going to get sick of it, no matter how much you like it. And the same thing, if you keep feeding the heart the same food, eventually it's not going to like it anymore. That's why, interestingly, you hear the Prophet ﷺ describing multiple tasks. Somebody will come to the Prophet, Ya Rasulullah, what is the best thing I can do? The Prophet would say, for example, خَيْرُكُمْ مَنْ تَعَلَّمَ الْقُرْآنَ وَعَلَّمَهُ. The best among you is the one who studies the Quran and teaches it to others. Okay, it's the Quran. In another hadith, الدعاء هو العبادة. The dua is the essence of worship. Well, it's the dua then. In another hadith, what's the best thing? To be kind to your parents. Well, which one is it? Which one is best? The answer is, whatever you find your heart in, that is the best. Sometimes you feel like the Quran, that would be the best thing you can do at that time. Sometimes you feel like the dua, it will be that thing at that time. So that's what the Prophet ﷺ is giving us the option. That whatever you find your heart in, that will be the best. So the heart has multiple food that has to be taken into account whenever you're feeding it. And it's not just one thing, but it's multiple things. So achieving the balance is attained by watching your heart first and foremost. So you have to be able to monitor and to know what's going on inside. I have to know, just like, for example, if you're watching your health, you measure your blood pressure, you measure your blood sugar or whatnot in different tests. And so the person has to think about actually monitoring and then checking their heart to see whether anything actually is needed. And we should be honest with ourselves, and then keeping in mind that there's no one particular recipe for a balance. A lot of the time, we like a specific formula. People like yes or no answer, like a specific formula. In other words, the balance is 1 + 2x + 3z plus xy, whatever, equals, and then you plug in the information, and this will be my balance. But the fact is, things don't work this way, because a balance is not a ready-made formula. It changes from one person to the other, because people are not the same. People are different. They may be similar, but there are no two people that are exactly the same. Different personalities, different mentality, different education, different experience, and as a result, then different expectations will be from each one of them. Each is expected to do things differently. And as a result, the balance lies differently from one person to the other. Of course, once the obligations and the basics are met. So we're not talking about a certain formula or a certain mold that we all have to fit in. And that's what happens sometimes, when we try to teach Islam, that a specific mold has to be universal. This would never work. The Sahaba were not like that, alayhim ridwanullah. I mean, you have sometimes extreme among the Sahaba relative to one another. Like Abdullah ibn Abbas and Abdullah ibn Umar. One very permissive, one very strict. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq and Umar ibn Khattab, may Allah be pleased with them all. So that's why they maintain their individuality. So when you're talking about achieving a balance, it's a balance for you. And what works for you may not work for me. Again, provided that the basics are met. So we're not talking, again, like a ready-made meal that everybody actually has to take. But each will have it actually in a different place. Because sometimes what happens, you think, well, the best thing for me is to be a hafidh like him, Sheikh Abdul Rahman. I want to be hafidh like him. I want to be a faqih like him. I want to be a strong person like her. I want to be an educated like him. And then anyway, we feel that we can do everything. Well, no, that's not the way it's going to work. You have to take into account what you can do and what would work actually better for you. That's why we do not impose our own formula on the others. So if I was able to achieve a balance or be in a certain place where I feel comfortable and happy and this works for me and gives me happiness, it doesn't mean that I can impose it on the others. It works for me, it doesn't mean it's going to work for everybody else. So we don't have to always actually follow a specific track or a specific actually path that we have set for ourselves and for the others. Again, provided the basics are covered. You know, the guidance of the Prophet ﷺ accommodates all of that. And if you look at the Sahaba alayhim ridwanullah, you'll find, like I said, a lot of differences. You have some that were known, for example, for a lot of wara' and zuhud, like Abu Dharr al-Ghifari, for example. And you have someone like Khalid ibn al-Walid alayhi ridwanullah, who was known for his leadership skills. You know, this is, and they said that when the Quran, you know, he would recite the short surahs and even make mistakes. But he was known for his leadership skills. Of course, Khalid ibn al-Walid, the great leader, he never lost any battle. And the Prophet ﷺ called him the sharp sword of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now again, I'm going to go back to Abu Dharr al-Ghifari. The Prophet told him that never become a leader. If you have two people, don't become a leader yourself. You have a weakness in that regard. So Khalid ibn al-Walid is the more visible, the more glamorous one. Which one is better? Who's better? Khalid ibn al-Walid, the great leader, the more visible one, or Abu Dharr al-Ghifari? That was a question to you. Who? Both of them? Somebody else? You know, people, of course, like I said, the visible one, the glamorous one, was Khalid ibn al-Walid, right? But the one that is better is definitely Abu Dharr al-Ghifari. There's no question about that. He was one of the early Muslims. You know, he even engaged in a dispute with Khalid ibn al-Walid once, and the Prophet told Khalid ibn al-Walid, leave my Sahaba alone. Means this is one of the closest one. And he said that to Khalid, that if one of you spend like the mountain of Uhud, it's not equivalent to even a handful of one of them would spend. So Abu Dharr is definitely of a higher status. But I mean, why am I mentioning that? Because there are certain aspects of our work that are more visible and more glamorous, and sometimes we feel that these are the best ones. Obviously not in this case. It's the one that is better in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What works for Abu Dharr does not work for Khalid ibn al-Walid, and the other way around. And both of them achieved the balance that we're talking about. So again, a balance is not a ready-made formula that everybody actually had to fit in. Another important aspect is that your balance yourself is dynamic. It changes. What used to work for you when you were 10 years old does not work for you today, or 10 years ago. Different things are expected of you. A person cannot say the same thing. You know, once I was talking to one of my sheikh, who passed away, may Allah have mercy on his soul, that I think many of us can relate to that when you start becoming more religious and more serious about religion, you feel that your heart is very soft, that anything makes you cry, anything connects you. And I was telling him, like years later, that I'm doing the same thing and I'm not feeling the same way. What's missing in there? And he said, you know, when a little kid starts school, elementary school, if he learns how to spell his name, the teacher gives him a star, rewards him. The teacher rewards him. But then that kid grows up and he goes to college. And if he writes his name, he should not expect a reward at that time. He's in college now. In other words, to get the reward, you have to do more More is expected of you. You cannot use the elementary school standard. Well, but I am writing my name. I'm not getting the star anymore. Well, more is expected of you. That's why it's a dynamic thing, and we have to change accordingly. And the Prophet said, if your 2 days are the same, you're a loser. In other words, if your yesterday and your today are the same, you're a loser, because you're growing older, more experience, more knowledge, so more is expected of you. You cannot have the same standards for the rest of your life. That's when we were talking about achieving a balance. It's a changing thing. So each time you reach a certain level, it opens a new horizon for you, and it challenges you to move to the second level. And that's one of the meaning of Ihdina as-Sirat al-Mustaqim. Guide us to the straight path. And we say it many times a day in our prayer, right? Well, guide us to the straight path, Islam. Okay, but we are Muslims. So why do we have to keep repeating the request? Guide us to the straight path, even in partial matters. Should I go to this school or to that school? Ihdina as-Sirat al-Mustaqim. Should I involve with this or with that? Ihdina as-Sirat al-Mustaqim. Should I study this or that? Ihdina as-Sirat al-Mustaqim. So it's a dynamic concept that's continuous for the rest of our life. So again, when we're talking about achieving balance, it takes into account all of that. It takes into account our potential, the things that we like, what we can do, and the state that we are in. And again, when we're talking about the Sahaba alayhim ridwanullah, they themselves, even though they all tried their best to follow the same example, Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, they ended up in different places. What I mean in the different places, that means like one is good, one is bad. No, but all of them actually are path leading to the same goal at the end. That's how the Sahaba did alayhim ridwanullah. But the important thing is to make sure that no one aspect of me takes over another, or no one aspect of me is neglected. Because like I said, it's going to come back and hit me in the face. Again, my brothers and sisters, it's a dynamic concept. I just want to finish with a couple of verses when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned it in a very interesting and beautiful way. And of course the whole Quran is beautiful. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالسَّمَاءُ رَفَعَهَا وَوَضَعَ الْمِيزَانِ. Allah established heaven and He put the balance. And لَا تَطْغَوْا فِي الْمِيزَانِ. This is one extreme. Do not basically go into excesses when it comes to the balance. وَلَا تَطْغَوْا بِالْمِيزَانِ. And after that, وَأَقِيمُوا الْوَزْنَ بِالْقِسْطِ. Establish the balance justly. وَلَا تُخْسِرُوا الْمِيزَانِ. The interesting thing is that Allah says, أَقِيمُوا الْوَزْنَ بِالْقِسْطِ, between two extremes. The first one is, أَلَّا تَطْغَوْا فِي الْمِيزَانِ, and وَلَا تُخْسِرُوا الْمِيزَانِ. So not going into excesses, not going into actually the other extreme, into diminishing it. So the balance is, وَأَقِيمُوا الْوَزْنَ بِالْقِسْطِ. Again, my brothers and sisters, it's a continuous work. But a lot of the time, of course, we like a specific answer, but the more you discover, the more you learn about yourself, the more you learn about what is expected of you. That's why life is an everlasting, is a continuous learning process. Nobody will know everything. Because once you feel that you learn everything and you know everything, that's when you die, that's when you stop. And you find that among the greatest of the scholars, they were continuously seeking knowledge. One of them was the great Ahmad ibn Hanbal, alayhi ridwanullah. During his life, shortly before his death, going from one halaqah to another, from one book to the other. And some of his students, they told him, Ya Imam, nobody knows as much as you do. Take it easy on yourself. And he said, مَعَ الْمِحْبَرَ حَتَّى الْمِقْبَرَ. I will be with the inkwell, meaning learning, until I die. So there's no ending to the process of learning. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us perseverance in this life and the next. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us steadfastness in this life and the next. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. We have time for Q&A? Okay. I think we have some time for some questions or comments. Jazakumullah khair. The question, I'm sorry? Let me repeat the question, is that if a person actually is new into Islam or just into getting serious about Islam, how do you learn when you have so many opinions and so many sources and so many people to learn from? The rule here is that if there's someone that you trust as far as knowledge and as far as character, a person's piety, then I will take from that person. Because why? Because when you have multiple opinions, especially if you know that some people, for example, have multiple opinions regarding certain issues, when you keep on asking one after the other, you ended up not benefiting from either. But if there's someone that you trust, I would say at least as a start, there's a person in particular, a particular sheikh, a particular imam, or a writer or scholar that I really trust that person's knowledge and character and his piety, then I will take from that. But keeping in mind that nobody is infallible except the Prophet ﷺ. You know, the Imam Malik ibn Anas used to say that basically you can take or reject anyone's opinion except that of the Prophet. So nobody is infallible except the Prophet ﷺ. So when I'm taking from that specific sheikh or imam because I trust him, I like the way he presents that, keeping in mind that he's not infallible. So he's not a sacred person. So I would say starting that way, and of course the more you learn yourself, the more you learn, the more you discover, the more you can sometimes discern or just try to basically judge some of the things that are being said on your own into deciding actually which one to take and which one to leave. But that would be the start that I would take.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
So my question is, you talked about balance in religion and our everyday activities. Can you give examples of how I could maintain balance in my education, my career, my ibadah, so that one does not have more weight over the other? And also, I work as a teacher. How can I use that, my ilm, to serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala?
Jazakumullah khair. You know, the topic is really big, by the way. I mean, we're just scratching the surface, I mean, obviously. See, when you're talking about achieving a balance, another important consideration is priority, how to prioritize. That's why I said that's one of the main components of achieving the balance is to prioritize, because nobody can do everything. Sometimes we like to. I want to do here, and then you find some brothers all over the map. He wants to do in here, he wants to do in there, he wants to be involved in this or in that. You cannot do that, and you go crazy in the process. You have to prioritize based on different considerations, based on which one brings you the most benefit, which one gives you the most output, so to speak, relative to the input that you're putting in. And that which is really important. These are some of the considerations. How do you determine that? Sometimes you have to ask people that have some expertise in the field, or some people that have some information. You know, there's a beautiful saying in Arabic that he who consults with others shares their mind with them. That's why I would start with that, and I think it starts with that by prioritizing. What is the most important thing to me? And in light of that, I start actually looking into achieving a certain and a specific balance, but keeping in mind that there might be more than one way to achieve the same goal. So if I chose one way, I cannot impose my way on you, so long as it is going actually in line with that which is permissible by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. And doing something for the sake of Allah, this is a very comprehensive term, by the way, very inclusive. It is not a specific thing. There's a story once, the Sahaba alayhi were standing by the Prophet, and they found a person building things and moving things from here and there, and they said to the Prophet, Ya Rasulullah, لو كان هذا في سبيل الله, لو كان ذلك في سبيل الله. We wish this was for the sake of Allah. And the Prophet says, ما تعدون سبيل الله فيكم? What do you consider this for the sake of Allah? And the Prophet said, if he's supporting two elderly parents, that is for the sake of Allah. If he's supporting a wife and children, that is for the sake of Allah. So for the sake of Allah can take on many shapes. It is not a specific formula. It is not so when you're teaching, that could be for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If I'm doing it with honesty and sincerity, you know, and doing something really good, that could be for the sake of Allah. So that it can be done multiple ways. It's not one specific way. You know, a lot of the time, we think and we praise, let's say, for example, we hear of somebody dying when he was praying Salat al-Fajr. Oh, mashallah, he died while he was praying, you know. And I think somebody who dies while he's helping others is no less than that. Somebody who dies while helping and supporting somebody else, or, you know, this is good. You know, of course, we're not looking to die, you know. The Prophet says the best of the people are those that have a long, productive life. But the point here is that sometimes we have a narrow definition of what is considered for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when it can be much broader than that and more inclusive. Last question? Okay.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
How do you achieve consistency?
Jazakallah khair. That's the big question, right? How do you achieve the steadfastness? How do you continue? You know, a lot of us actually are really good at starting something, but not good at continuing it and maintaining it. You know, there are different, well, all of us can raise our hands, you know. We're all doing these things, you know. And I think, you know, you have to take certain factors into consideration. You know, a lot of the time we think that, okay, I'm making dua and it's not working. Dua is great, is one of the causes to bring about the effect. But there are other factors as well. You know, if I want a desired or a desirable effect, I have to take the required causes. I don't expect things to happen on their own. So if I want to achieve steadfastness, I have to put myself in an environment where that would be the natural result. And that's the best way to change, by the way, is to bring about the change. I cannot, repeat the same actions and expect different results. This is the definition of insanity, by the way. Repeating the same actions and expecting different results. So if I want steadfastness, I have to put myself in an environment that will be conducive to that. My friends, my family, the way I prioritize my life, how I do certain things. And like I said, this is a very general answer because the question is very general, actually, And the specific will depend on what I'm trying to maintain, consistently. That's why there are certain steps that have to be taken. Again, like I said, the dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the company, And one thing that is really important, that while trying to change, it is expected to have bumps. So in other words, change never goes like that. It doesn't. It goes like this. Sometimes we slip, sometimes we trip. So if I slip back into my old ways, a relapse does not mean a failure. It does not. A relapse means I have to adjust my approach. That's what it means. So that's why we don't despair along the way. Like I said, the Sahaba, they had their slips. They would be doing certain things and they fight and happens, But however, they were always watching their own behavior. So when they slip into their old ways, they would always actually correct the situation. That's why, again, it's a process. It's a process. We go up and down, but eventually, hopefully, we keep on going in the right direction. I'm sorry.
Assalamu alaikum. Oh, yes. Jazakallah khair for the enlightening talk. I have a question about a different type of balance. The political climate now is kind of normalizing the Islamophobic rhetoric. And my question is, how do we balance actually responding to these comments, especially in the workplace, in a respectable manner, but at the same time, kind of saying peace to the ignorant people, kind of like in Surah Al-Furqan. So how do we balance? Like when should we actually respond when we overhear comments, or should we just ignore these comments and not even give them any time?
Wallah, jazakumullah khair. That's a good question, wallahi. I think we'll be addressing some of that in my next lecture about the character, as the person's character as a mean of dealing with Islamophobia. It depends on the situation. Sometimes you have to say something, but sometimes you have to be quiet. But keeping in mind that a change brings about, a challenge. And that's what happens a lot of the time. In other words, we cannot be complacent or feel comfortable where we are, not bothering with anything. In other words, thinking that everything is going to work. Sometimes we're going to have to take some heat while trying to change things. That's why sometimes we have to stand up for what we believe in. That's the way it happens. That's how a change happens. But meanwhile, but this is a very sensitive challenge, by the way, because sometimes some people are not strong enough to stand up. One thing that can be detrimental is when some of us actually keep on checking every Islamophobic attack that happens in the country. In other words, we hear of everything. This gets to me. Or that a person, this is not for everybody. This is not for everybody, because that's the impression you're going to get, that everybody's bad, everybody's Islamophobic, which is not the truth, by the way. Of course, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, that in other people that are loud are more visible, but it doesn't mean that everybody's like that. And sometimes when you keep on reading about every single homophobic attack, the impression that you're going to get is that everybody's bad. No, it's not. There's a lot of goodness in the people. There's still a lot of goodness in the people. And my suggestion is that if you feel that it is getting to you, you may want to distance yourself a little bit actually from the news. This is not denial, because sometimes we cannot all handle that. You may have to keep a distance from that, in order for you to deal better with your life and not to only focus on that. Like I said, there are some great people, there are some really good people around. And the fact that some people are more vocal, it doesn't mean everybody actually is like that. But interestingly, subhanAllah, do I have a couple of minutes? We're running over. Okay, quickly. If you look at the way the Quran comments on the big events that happen, like for example, the Battle of Uhud. What was the main event that turned the victory into a defeat? It was the maneuver of Khalid bin Walid, right? What Khalid bin Walid did, went around the hill and killed the archers, and the whole victory turned into a defeat. But yet you do not find any mention of that in Surah Ali Imran, which talks about the Battle of Uhud. But all of what it talks about is our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How do you react to these events? This happened. How do you respond to that? And that's really what is neglected much of the time. We focus so much on activism. Now, by the way, we do activism, but we're not activists. Activism is part of what we do. But we have to be connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because after the defeat and the loss of 70 companions, Allah revealed to the companions a great verse, and the whole Quran is great. وَلَا تَهِنُوا وَلَا تَحْزَنُوا وَأَنْتُمُ الْأَعْلَوْنَ إِن كُنتُم مُؤْمِنِينَ. Allah, think about this. Do not despair. Do not be saddened. And you are the highest if you are believers. This came after a defeat, not after a victory. It came after Uhud, not after Badr. To indicate that the attitude of the Muslim is not dictated by situations. If you have that belief in your heart, then nothing matters. Nothing matters. So long as the connection is there, and that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants the Sahaba to have, to go beyond just be patient, to tolerate the pain and the loss, into feeling the highest at the time of a defeat. In kuntum mu'minin, if you have believers. And this will never be lost. If I'm connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then nothing else matters. So anyway, jazakum Allah khair, inshallah we'll see you in the next session. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. I'm sorry for taking that.